Welcome to our October speaker and workshop series. What is the public interest in the Middle Rio Grande water management? If you're just joining, you may see that we have a slightly different format for our Zoom call. We're hosting a webinar for this month. If you are not able to introduce yourself in the chat, rest assured you'll have a chance to say who you are in the Q&A portion. If you can find that module, you will be able to ask questions during this webinar, and we'll have those available towards the end. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining the Water Advocates for New Mexico and the Middle Rio Grande workshop for October. We are thrilled to have Barbara Baca with us here on stage. Eric Olivas may be joining us. Norm Guame, president of the Water Advocates for New Mexico and the Middle Rio Grande, will be introducing our panel and workshop shortly. For those of you that are regular participants with our workshop series, you will notice we have a slightly different look this month. We are doing a Zoom webinar rather than our usual Zoom call. So some of our chat functions are not available, but rest assured you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. You are using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll wait just a few more minutes before we get started.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Norm Guame, president of the Water Advocates. I think we have a little feedback. Welcome to our webinar, our workshop tonight. We'll be talking about what is the public interest in Rio Grande water management. I'll turn it back over to our moderator for additional beginning information.
Thank you, Norm. While we resolve some of our audio technical difficulties, thank you for tuning in for our October workshop, Think Water, Act Now, part of our Think Water, Act Now workshop and speaker series. The Water Advocates for New Mexico and the Middle Rio Grande has been long involved with water planning issues in the state, and particularly in the Middle Rio Grande. And we're excited about this workshop today with Bernalillo County Commissioner Barbara Baca and Eric Olivas.
Eric Olivas will not be able to join us tonight. He has become ill and couldn't not make it, so the discussion will be between Commission Chair Barbara Baca and me.
Looks like audio sounds well. Again, thank you for that update, Norm. I think you can proceed.
Well, we would like to start with this land acknowledgement, and I'm going to read it. The Water Advocates' main activism areas are located on the traditional homelands of the pueblos of Cochiti, Santo Domingo, San Felipe, Santa Ana, Sandia, and Isleta, the original peoples of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache, since time immemorial, have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land and the water itself, and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations, and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. We gratefully recognize our history. A few initial announcements. This is our 6th workshop in this series. All of the workshops are directly linked to the 2023 Water Security Planning Act, which is landmark legislation that passed the legislature unanimously last year. We have workshops coming up. Our workshops are on the 3rd Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. In November, we're going to be focusing on requests for action by the 2024 legislature. We're skipping December, and in January, we will resume with a groundwater management expert, Maurice Hall, who will be the speaker on January 18th. And I'm going to introduce the topic with some general slides. We're going to be talking about the Middle Rio Grande. So first, let me orient you as to the geographic boundaries. The Middle Rio Grande is the watershed, the water basin of the Rio Grande, from the Otoe gauge, which is on the bridge to Los Alamos, south to Elephant Butte Dam. That is the region of New Mexico that has separate water depletion limits and water delivery obligations for all of the water users who live below Elephant Butte Dam. Our most recent water budget for the Middle Rio Grande was prepared in about the year 2000. I was director of the Interstate Stream Commission when this budget study was commissioned. The most recent budget we have is for 2000 development conditions and the mean water supply that existed from 1950 to 2000. Obviously, things have changed, and we must update our budget so we know where we stand. A water budget is a simple concept. It just means that, the amount of water that we use is balanced by our water supplies. And right now, our water budget is not balanced, and it includes depletion of both the river, and this graphic shows the trend. We have a debt limit of 200,000 acre feet that we have been trending toward for some time. And I understand that this year may present additional challenges driving us even deeper into debt. And we have a hard limit at owing 200,000 acre feet to the water users below Elephant Butte Dam. The big picture says we need to prevent a tragedy of the Middle Rio Grande Water Resources Commons. That tragedy is ongoing, and what that means is all of our uses are greater than our water supply can sustain over time. In the Middle Rio Grande, water governance is largely passive or reactive. The parts don't make a coherent whole. All the water institutions in the Middle Valley, by their very nature, were established to serve their customers, and they don't have a global view of the situation overall in the Middle Rio Grande. The state has no capacity to enforce and implement state water law. It's been starved of capacity by actions of the past, and those resources that the state agencies need have not been restored. And the only water demand management, what that means is the only controls on water use are local controls. The state really doesn't have them. A poll was conducted by two foundations that operate in New Mexico, and I believe that was at the end of 2021. And the poll is interesting because the pollster contacted representative voters from urban, suburban, and rural areas across New Mexico. The first question to everybody was, what are New Mexico's most serious problems? Nobody mentioned water. But when the pollster asked questions about water, people agreed that we must pay attention to our water, and sustainability of our water supplies is an urgent priority. So that sets the stage for our conversation this evening. I'd like to introduce Barbara Baca. We need a joint view. Commission Chair Barbara Baca, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for making arrangements that we could have this webinar filmed in Bernalillo County's TV studios.
Welcome, and thank you for having me.
Commission Chair Baca is a marvelous person, and I think we're all fortunate that she is taking the lead for the elected officials who govern the county for us. As I said, Commissioner Eric Olivas was stricken with illness and is not available to meet with us tonight. So Barbara and I will carry on this conversation. Barbara, the topic that we are addressing tonight has to do with what is the public interest in water governance in the Middle Rio Grande. And public interest is a phrase that I think everybody understands because it's just English. The legal term that applies here is what is the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande region? One of the aspects of the 2023 Water Security Planning Act is that we have to define what the public welfare of the region is. And let me just talk very briefly about this new law that passed this last session of the legislature unanimously. There wasn't a single no vote, either in committee or on either floor. It was signed by the governor, and now it is state law. This new law completely revamps the concepts of regional water planning in very material and specific ways. First, the whole act is focused on implementation of plans. We need to decide what we need to do to become sustainable, to increase the resilience of our water supplies, to meet the public welfare of the region, and it's up to us, under the new authorities and responsibilities delegated to regions across New Mexico by the state, to do these things. The state law basically sets up a framework to implement and govern the Water Security Planning Act, and much work is on our plate now to do all the things that the Water Security Planning Act tells both the state, and that would be the Interstate Stream Commission, and the regions to do. So tonight, we will devote about 45 minutes of conversation to the concepts and considerations of defining the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande. We'll talk about the opportunity and the need to get started by funding a well-designed process specific to our unique region. We'll talk about creating the water planning entity that the 2023 state law requires us to self-organize. Self-organization is one of many duties that the entity will have. And among those is leading the collaborative definition of the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande as it pertains to water governance. We'll talk about how the law requires the region to apply that definition as it chooses in evaluating and prioritizing the programs, policies, and projects that are needed to bring this region into balance with its water supply. We're already using a bit too much, about 10 to 15% too much, and we know that our water supplies are going to decline considerably due to global warming and the changes in climate. The best information we have available is another 25% reductions above what's already happened by the year 2070. So Barbara, let's begin this conversation. We're fortunate to live in New Mexico's Middle Rio Grande Valley. We celebrate the beauty, our diversity, our shared values. We respect our distinct values associated with our heritage. What are your thoughts about what we need to do with regard to our water supply situation to maintain this place that we love and call home?
Wow. I would start with, first, I want to take a step back and thank the state legislature for enacting this security planning, water security planning, because a unanimous vote is actually probably very rare, but I think that what we're seeing is the value, the importance of water is on everyone's mind now. And water is life. And this is the reason that Albuquerque is where Albuquerque is, my hometown, is because of the Rio Grande. So the Middle Rio Grande Valley, back to your question, is just a special place for me, for my family. I go back generations in the Middle Rio Grande Valley, and it's so very important that we all work together and understand the value. So I'm very much ready to roll up my sleeves, and as Bernalillo County representative, I'm just going off of a 4-year term on the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District Board. And I learned quite a lot, and the importance of collaboration is right there at the top of our water managers working together to make good, sound decisions, and we can't operate separately. We have to work together. And so this planning effort is just music to my ears, and I think that many parts, and we can continue on that, but that's my top of mind thoughts.
It really is amazing that substantive legislation that is going to basically direct us to our future passed unanimously.
Yeah.
The first year it was introduced. And there's a background to the act. It didn't materialize out of nowhere. But we're very glad it's passed. And from the water advocates' perspective, we would like to see the passage of that act be recognized when we look back from the future as the tipping point from which we accelerated our progress to pay attention to our water and to recognize, as you said, that that water is life, and without water, there's nothing. Mm-hmm. We have a complex society in the Middle Rio Grande. And it's one of the places I think we all love to live here. We have a lot of different values. The new law requires that we come up with our shared values. And that really is what the public welfare of the region with respect to water governance is all about. Do you have any thoughts about a process to collaborate and develop shared values?
Sure. I think the real important thing is what you're doing here tonight, and that is educating all parties on what the real challenges that we face currently and that we will face in the future, what those challenges are. So I think establishing sort of an educational program as we identify the stakeholders that need to be working together in this planning process. Because as you said, we have the 6 Middle Rio Grande pueblos, we have farmers in the valley, we have urban dwellers, we have folks that care about the resulting factors, which are the beautiful bosque and of course the Endangered Species Act, and making sure that we follow those laws. And so all of those components are not so easy, but I think that there is the common thread, and it really is. It is the river. The river is the heart. I always said the river is the heart of our community. And I don't want to forget the acequia culture and the acequias that really make our valley green and allow for small local farmers to exist, to provide locally grown food. Very important, but the equally important to that food and that irrigation is the culture and the celebration of that culture. Because if we don't hang on to that, we lose so much. That is one of the unique factors, I think, that we have playing into this, and we have the ability to reach out to all of those communities, and we actually the obligation to reach out to all of those communities to come up with where we're heading in the future. So.
Right, and I think the act, the state law says that we must do that. So it's really not a choice, but it's something we want to do and need to do. Would you comment about our ability to maintain our tricultural heritage? And it's even more than that. There's so many aspects to water use. You mentioned, I think, the big ones, environmental uses, and agriculture actually consume most of the water in the Middle Rio Grande. And if we balance the budget, well, we don't know what our solution will be, but we can't balance the budget off of the little pieces of the budget. We have to balance it off the big chunks.
Which are agriculture, the riparian use in the top 3. Oh, municipal.
Well, no, municipal is actually not. In the top 3 would be riparian, evapotranspiration, the agricultural consumptive uses. The return flows don't count because they're still in the system. And then reservoir evaporation.
Oh.
The Middle Valley is responsible for the evaporation from Elephant Butte Reservoir. It comes out of our limited share. Here's another interesting aspect to look at. The Middle Rio Grande, I believe, has over half of the state's population. About or over half of the state's economy. Much of the diversity and the economy is located here. And we have a thin slice of the water. It's a huge challenge to stretch that water to meet all of our demands in the future, now and in the future. And I appreciate your commitment to
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two questions. I mean, you also asked about the tricultural, nature of where we live in the valley, and I actually think that is a huge strength that we have in Bernalillo County and the full, Middle Rio Grande Valley. That's where I came from. That is my, my heritage. It's in my blood, So, and I feel that is something that is a strength that we need to bring to the table in involving the pueblos, the farming communities, and actually the urban dwelling, population has a real opportunity to give back and understand what they value on the river in every time they ride their bike or they paddle their paddleboard, that they are paying into, if they're in the benefited area of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, they are paying for the operation of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, which is river flood control and irrigation and protection of the native species and the endangered species. So, I mean, we have a lot in common and a lot that holds us together. I also advocate for. So I sit now as a member of the Bernalillo County Commission. I sit on the Water Utility Authority Board, which again is actually a collaboration because it is the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County working together relating to water resources, as you know. They, as an organization, are working very hard on conservation. They need to also work with the other agencies, the Interstate Stream Commission, which they do. Our chair is our executive director. So at the policy level, those folks need to be engaged and come to the table, and I'm committed to serving in that role as we move forward.
Right, and one of the reasons I'm disappointed, sad that Commissioner Olivas could not be here with us is because he's chair of the Water Utility Authority Board. And I think it's actually remarkable that that we have this joining of interests now. It means that we're, I think, on our way to dealing with our issues, facing our water issues instead of sweeping them aside.
That's right.
Do you think that people understand where our water comes from and where it goes?
Oh, not most people. I think that probably your organization, your group, and most people on this Zoom have a high level of understanding. I'm still figuring out, how to articulate the complexities of the Rio Grande Compact, and but it is a real. That's why I started with. I think that part of the planning process. I think a robust planning process is really important here, and I think a big part of that at the beginning phase needs to be an education
Right.
about our water and about where we are, and about the new, we call it the new hydrologic reality with climate change and the drought that we're dealing with. That needs to be talked about over the breakfast table, over our cup of coffee, that kind of thing. And the only way to do that, I think, is through a really robust outreach, education, and planning process.
So one conclusion is that the public interest in Rio Grande water management starts with public education.
Yeah, I believe so.
And we're trying hard to do that, and that needs to expand. One of the things we talk about is the development of a coalition of the willing to push the things forward that the Water Security Planning Act tells us we must do, and try to do it with all due speed, because time is getting away from us and our problems only grow worse with time. What are your thoughts about providing for the Middle Rio Grande's people, their public health, safety and welfare, which is really the primary duty of government is to protect the public's safety, health, and welfare. And water is integral to that, but we've never really treated it that way. You have thoughts as to how that relates to our job ahead?
Well, I think that I'm learning more. Again, I just started on the water, Albuquerque, Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority, big mouthful, on that board, and they have a lot that they do on water quality. But I think the welfare of the community is about the availability of water, and I like your statements on your mission for this advocacy group of equitable sustainability. I think is that or equitable sacrifice almost of everyone understanding that it is a sacred resource, but it is also one that is scarce unless we really look at it with science and data and public will, and political will to move forward. So,
and that's a very important aspect of the new law, because it says that all plans will be developed on the best data available. And it's actually the state's responsibility to assemble that data and provide it to the planning regions, unlike in the previous round where the regions had to generate their own data. And that's a big job too. Let's see.
One of the things, Norm, while you're looking, I would like to emphasize, and it was in some of our notes that you provided to me, that our bosque ecosystem as it exists today with our senescing cottonwood forest was really a creation of the river flood control all those years ago. We just are celebrating the centennial of the Conservancy Act. And in 2 years, the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District will celebrate their birthday, their anniversary of 100 years. But with the creation of the dams and the levee system, we've created this beautiful cottonwood forest that we all so dearly love. Well, it's growing old, and we need to take a look at that forest and understand the evapotranspiration. And I am not about cutting down trees. What I am about is looking at where we are heading with this and looking at where we can recreate the mosaic of vegetation that is equally beautiful and a new kind of ecosystem as some of those trees die off. We have been doing pole planting of cottonwood and willow and natives, and we've been extracting the invasive species and those kinds of things. So the city and the county and the Conservancy District have worked well, and the state, have worked well together to manage this forest in Bernalillo County, I know, which is where I'm familiar. But we need to look at it as a whole, and this vegetation management with this new reality of less water that I think we can do smartly, and we can do so that there's even fire management that is related within that, and so we don't lose our big stand of cottonwood trees. So that's another aspect, I think, of what we need to be doing in this planning.
Well, I attended the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District Centennial Celebration, and I was amazed at a story that I was not familiar with, and that is a tricultural collaboration in the early 1900s that led to the formation of the Conservancy District. Things have changed immensely since that time. And one of the things that was done was we decided we wanted to occupy the floodplain. And so we pinned the river to one place. And management of that river in one place has proven to be very challenging. So we have a lot of work to do to figure out how we can do that, better and more equitably. You mentioned equity a moment ago. The phrase the water advocates like to use is, we think it's important that we seek equitable adaptation to increasing water scarcity. But the new law doesn't require regions to be equitable. It requires them to define their values in a public welfare statement. And so what are your thoughts about including equity in the Middle Rio Grande region's public welfare statement?
I think we deal with that every day, in different forms of the meaning of the word in the Middle Rio Grande Valley. For the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, we talked about equitable distribution, so that you provide irrigation to small farmers as well as large farmers as water is available to us to divert. I think the equity of, again, I mentioned the acequias are an extremely important component of the valley and the good use of water or the efficient use of water. So us helping farmers with on-farm improvements to make more efficient distribution of the water, helping acequia communities with more efficient conveyance of waters, while we protect the beautiful acequias that are also our pathways through our communities and connections between our communities. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but when I think of equity, I think of not just the water use, but the appreciation of all peoples who live along the river and our acequias.
Well, equity for me with respect to water means that everybody has what they need, maybe not what they want, but what they really need, and certainly enough clean, safe drinking water for everybody. Let me ask you another difficult question. We have communities in the Middle Valley that, such as Placitas, or even the city of Rio Rancho, that were developed by commercial interests that really didn't have the water rights or the water supply to provide sustainable supplies to those communities over time. The other communities along the river have obtained water rights, but Rio Rancho has relatively few. Its groundwater depletions are quite high. What is the public welfare of the region with respect to providing water for people where they live, even if they live in a place where it's difficult to get water to?
Mm-hmm. Well, one, I would say we need to base our land use decisions on water availability, and the fact that climate change and the new hydrologic reality is we cannot allow for sprawl development. That just is against all of what we're talking about here, about smart working together to address the minimal resource that we have of water. Second, I think we need to be very careful of transferring any water rights out of the valley, to other locations, so that we do retain those water rights in the valley area. It's a very difficult debate, and again, I believe that educating our communities, including myself, our elected officials, about the decisions that we make when we're talking about land use approvals really have an impact on our scarce water and the availability of it. So,
how much of a challenge do you see in all of us, all interests, representatives of all stakeholder interests, coming together and finding common ground?
I'm hopeful because I just like, I like to be hopeful, and I feel that if you're not, you're going to fail from the beginning. So I think it is a huge challenge, but I do think that, again, I go back to education. If you talk about the value and the beauty of why we live where we live. And, you know, you talk to the water engineers and they talk about their kids that are, you know, riding the bike on the levee road. You know, we have these common things. Or you talk to the environmentalist who isn't an engineer but understands, you know, the facts that we convey to them, you know, through these educational programs. It's just there's commonality that we need to strive to bring to the surface, so that this large challenge, because it is a challenge, we need to recognize that, can be minimized and we can come to some agreement.
I think the framework of the Water Security Planning Act really calls for the regions to be an administrative group. Like our region, and it's not defined yet totally, but I think our region, I think it should go from Elephant Butte Dam upstream all the way to the bridge to Los Alamos. That is the compact region against which our debt or our credits are measured. So we have communities up and down the Rio Grande. We have different farming communities. They're all part of the Conservancy District. The Conservancy District really was built to provide water to the pueblos. And it was built so that individual acequias didn't have to try to dig ditches to divert water from the river by gravity. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. They tried and they did it, but the river would wipe out their work. But the region is large. And the framework of the Water Security Planning Act really starts at the community levels. So the regions would support communities in determining what they need to do to become sustainable, and then bring all of those values together into a common regional view. That's what we have to do.
Yeah. It's our charge.
I have a number of thoughts about items that are in the public welfare that may or may not, and I would appreciate maybe your comments about those. Is it in the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande to balance depletions for urban uses, for ag, for the environment, ecosystem services, species?
Yes.
It is in the public interest to balance those.
It is in the public interest. It is a difficult thing to do, but it is in the public interest, and that's...
And we don't have enough water to do everything we're doing now, much less in the future. So defining the public welfare with regard to water governance is going to also have to grapple with how we cut back. And who is affected? And are they treated fairly? And are we being equitable? Obviously, we must honor the time immemorial but still unquantified rights of the Middle Rio Grande Pueblos. They have prior and paramount rights, we call them, time immemorial water rights. Yet here we are in the middle of, well into the 21st century, and we haven't started to quantify what the rights of the Pueblos are. Do you have any thoughts about how we can approach that problem and recognizing that they are the most senior?
Yeah. Well, I think that it is very unique that as I understand it, our Rio Grande Compact called out that the Pueblos have this prior and paramount use of water. I have been very proud of our Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District CEO that he has, and our state engineer before him has valued and really reached out and encouraged the connection between the Pueblos, and they talk to the coalition of Pueblos, regularly, and we are in good communication, and I think we are in good standing right now. So I think that that is happening. I guess that would be my main thing. The relationship and the continued value that we place on each other as partners in the valley is the critical thing.
And actually, under the law, we don't have a chance. The Water Security Planning Act says, it emphasizes that everything we do has to be legal, and we must respect the water rights of the pueblos. Let me ask you another question. State Engineer Mike Hammond in our workshop last month was talking about the need for, I'm going to use the word reinvent. I don't think he used that word, but to basically restructure agriculture in the Middle Valley. And one of his points was that we can operate the surface water system and manage the shallow groundwater system so that farmers who are raising food can have a reliable supply, even if the surface water is not there. Now, that's going to take big changes. But State Engineer Hammond said that that was very important, and he noted the food supply chain disruptions that have occurred with COVID and the anticipation that climate disasters, are going to affect crops, and our food supply chain, if you want to call that, is undoubtedly going to be affected. Do you have any thoughts about converting agriculture in the Middle Valley so it's focused on food security?
Well, I think so highly of Mike Hammond. When I came into the Conservancy District, he was the chief engineer there. Now he is the state engineer. So if he says it can be done, it can be done. But I think that, again, I think it is about building relationships between the farming community, the farmers, and the providers of water, and having a mutual understanding of the fact that this very sacred resource is diminished. It's not the same as it was when their grandfather grew alfalfa. It's hard to ask people to change culturally what they traditionally have done, but it is not impossible if they see that there's an economic benefit, there's an economic value in it. And it's got to be people going to the table, not criticizing each other, not criticizing what their forefathers did, but providing the opportunities that are available and the change that needs to happen. So
that leads me to a question. Does it help the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande with regard to water management if we try our best not to wish that the past were different, but instead focus entirely on a better future? Well,
of course, we always have to focus on a better future. The past, don't look back, it might be gaining, or no, what is it? It's don't look back, it's behind you. You need to be looking forward. So that is what we absolutely have to do. And it's very hard. We've talked about culture, to start with. We're born into a culture that we want to continue, the legacy of our grandparents. And I think that the legacy a lot of farmers in the valley has also been advancement of their family and wealth and health and happiness. And so we've got to look forward and paint the picture of, this what we're dealing with climate change, what we're dealing with these droughts. It is something that is here and now, and we should have acted yesterday. So we absolutely have to act today.
Yeah, but nothing we do today changes what we didn't do.
Yeah.
So focus on that is just really not productive in the least. Mm-hmm. We have to do it better. You mentioned water as sacred, and I share that value. I think that water is truly sacred. Many other people view water as a commodity. How do we bridge that gap?
Well, that in that is the value system that sometimes it is difficult to change someone's mind on. You can't change those values. So again, I think that you've got to keep bringing the issue forward. I will continue to stake my claim that the sacred nature of water and water is life is what brought our peoples to the location that we are now, and we've got to recognize that. But you have got to be able to understand others' values and explain where we're going based on data and based on fact and based on how, if we don't do it together, we are not going to move as quickly as we need to. So,
and time is quite important. Well, the sacred nature of water, and it certainly is to our cultures here, is value that we need to work into our public welfare of the region statement. Mm-hmm. But I'm of the opinion that we're also going to need a market mechanism, to allow cities that have junior water rights, to access water in times of great shortage, a really bad year. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to develop a statement of the public welfare of the region with regard to water governance when we need to treat water both as a resource that can be moved to critical uses in times of shortage, while not fallowing agriculture, but maybe just having it rest for a while. I mean, I'm not sure what the solutions would be, and we shouldn't talk about the solutions right now. We should really just be talking about the process. Mm-hmm. But it occurs. I think that just illustrates the magnitude of our task. Is stopping the upstream transfer of water right points of diversion to maintain river flows in the public interest?
Well, you're going to have to answer that one, Norm.
We're all going to have to answer that one. And it's the same thing. It's really a different way to ask the question, to get to the point that you raised. Water is scarce. We don't have enough to go around. We have to come up with common values. So how do we get there? How do we get to a point that we can phrase our common values? Maybe I should start first by saying we have to create the entity to do the planning in the Middle Rio Grande that the Act requires us to do. We know that we need representatives of all interests to be involved, that every stakeholder interest needs to be represented by somebody that's at the table. What are your thoughts about a process that would allow us to stand up this entity next year so we can get to work?
Well, Bernalillo County is committed to putting some resources into this, whatever that may be, resources for planning money or resources of sweat equity from we as policymakers. So I think that finding those resources to move it forward is a good, very good first step. And I think, I'm sounding like so repetitive, but I do think, we need to, I believe we could start with, you're doing this now, but public workshops that educate people and about where we're heading and gather the interest while we are also, whatever, populating that planning unit, however that, with agencies, with representatives from all of the stakeholder groups. And I think, I was a planner in my past life, and I've always said that, a plan is important, but the planning process is the most important thing, because that's where you gain buy-in, that's where you gain the ability to implement the ultimate plan. So setting up this process that is very inclusive and representative is really key.
I've been fortunate enough in my career to have led a couple of collaborative efforts that did reach agreement and have been implemented. And I think we know how it's done. And I guess it's harder if there's not an immediate crisis before you. That's one of the things that makes the water challenge so difficult, is that it is a slow-moving train wreck. Do you have any comments about the alternative to coming together, which in my mind is to litigate our way to our water future?
I don't think there's an alternative. This is one of those times where we have to stare down this challenge and really convince our peers, our friends, our opponents, people who agree with us and people who don't, that to come to the table and give us your feedback and provide why this can't work, why it can work, all of those things to make it a stronger plan. I don't think there's an alternative but to do this planning, which is again why I'm so excited that the state legislature, unanimously supported that. That is monumental, and I think that if we have the political will at that level, we do at the local level here, and I think we can move it forward.
You've already mentioned one of the points that I wanted to talk about, and that is that our continuous bosque is old. It's dying in places. It consumes more water, I think, than the historical bosque did. I don't know that to be a fact, but the historical bosque was patchy, and it was constantly renewed. It was constantly refreshed by a river that swept across its floodplain and changed dramatically. Well, I don't know if that's a question as much as it is a statement, and you just made it. We're going to have to come to grips with all of our water uses and find ways to balance them. I should mention that the Act requires us, the state law requires us to accept the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. Sometimes those seem to me like water is being requested when there is no water to give. But yet we have to maintain the species. What is the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande with respect to maintenance of species?
Well, it's the law, as you said. And the Conservancy District has to grapple with that and on a day-to-day basis. And it's just absolutely necessary. The Endangered Species Act is a strength in our country, and it is something that we need to continue to stay laser focused on, in my opinion.
The federal government is not participating in collaborative activities. Well, actually, they have their own collaborative program, now that I think about it. How important do you think it is to get them to be participants?
The federal government?
The federal government, federal agencies.
Oh, absolutely important. I mean, the Bureau of Reclamation, we work with them on a day-to-day basis within the river channel. They have the same Endangered Species Act requirements that they are dealing with. We have, the Fish and Wildlife Service with Bosque del, the Valle de Oro. We have federal government at the table now. And so the BIA, we definitely need them to be engaged.
So kind of a bottom line on all of this is that we have a new law that's very powerful. It assigns regions. You are an elected official in this region and a leader to basically stand up and take on new responsibilities. And basically what it says is you regions You need to figure it out. Not you need to, you must. Figure out your own solutions, your own statements of the public welfare of the region, and you need to consider those as you determine the policies, programs, and projects to be prioritized for state implementation assistance. But first things first is standing up the entity. And then we need to be continuing this conversation. Well, I guess here, let me describe my thinking. If we do everything in series, one after another, we're not going to finish for a tremendous number of years. If we do things in parallel as much as we can, like standing up the entity next year, like beginning to gather our data together, like continuing this conversation, this initial conversation about the public welfare of the region, we're not going to need to have that defined for, in my estimation, maybe 3 years, maybe 4. But we better start talking about it now because it's such a big topic and it's so central to what we have to do. What are your thoughts about multiplying the conversation we're having tonight so that we begin to have these conversations in different venues, different people, different actors to consider what we must do? Is that too much to ask for right now?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I'm all for, this parallel process because I do think that you need this entity that it's a large charge, and a goal. So working with the community and working with our stakeholders is equally important, and those two things should happen simultaneously.
Well, I think it's maybe time to go to the audience for questions.
Great.
Let's see, we have one question. How do we know how much water we actually have and when will we run out? Where's the data? Well, in the Middle Rio Grande, we have a lot of data. We are a data-rich region because we've been having to study our water resources in detail, since, we started in the early 1990s. I think the answer to that question is, how do we know? We have to integrate all of the facts and the science to give us that picture of the water budget, where our water comes from, where it goes. And as we try to determine where it all goes, there's going to be question marks because there's places that water go that we can't measure. But we'll know what those questions are and we can strive to answer them.
Yeah. I think also, wasn't it, it was sponsored by then State Representative Melanie Stansbury, the data, shared data in Act in 2021, something
It was
like
the
that?
2019 Water Data
2019.
Act.
Okay. And with that very goal in mind. And as we know, she's now our Congresswoman, but I mean, we are working on that shared data and that shared information. So we have the best science.
Yes, I heard Representative Stansbury say when she was still a state representative before she was elected to Congress, that one of the reasons she introduced the 2019 Water Data Act was to see if any water legislation could pass. And it passed. And I think it passed by a large margin. And then in 2023, this very substantive piece of legislation passed unanimously.
Right.
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign.
Let's see. Here's a good question for you, Chair Baca. How can just folks with jobs, kids, responsibilities be part of this public process to decide how to share the water?
That's a good question. You know, when I was working for the city of Albuquerque, our open space program, we were trying to reach out to the community to talk about what their use of the river was for recreation. And we turned it into entertaining educational events that you could bring your family to and then provide input to. So my point is, and we did them at the Natural History Museum and the big IMAX theater. So we shared history, shared information, and then got feedback from the community. So my thought to this question is that we need to be creative in our outreach and in our education, make it fun, you know, make it interesting for all ages to want to participate in the discussion.
I think it starts with public education, and then people will decide how to be involved. They don't need to be involved personally. That's why we have elected representatives, you know, so they can just reach out and request or even demand, you know, that we come to an agreement, that we get this problem solved. This is a long question. Finding equitable solutions to the need for reducing flows for some uses, alfalfa, and increasing flows for other uses, biodiversity, indigenous, will be a super sensitive process. The emerging field of water ethics is being applied in some countries, Canada, the Netherlands, Australia, that are facing similar dilemmas. Is anyone looking for comparative lessons that could enrich our thinking here in New Mexico?
No, that's a good suggestion, and I think we should put that into our creative, you know, endeavor. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a good suggestion.
I think it's a great suggestion. I don't think there is an answer to it right now that I know of. Another question. Is any agency piloting projects to get more water, like supporting financing water harvesting for domestic use for people who have no water? Well, I don't know that any agency is doing that.
Not that I know of.
Lots of people are trying to get more water. Well, that brings me to another note. One of the things that I think people are drawn to are things that I call bright and shiny objects. You know, like treating oil field wastewater, you know, to reuse, or exporting water from where? I mean, even the Mississippi is running dry these days, or, you know, these little projects that seem interesting and might do a little bit, but they really aren't going to get to the heart of the problem. How do we keep those bright and shiny objects from distracting us? Facts and data, I think.
Okay, there you go. I think that is always the risk, you know, when you start a planning project and there are diversions, you know, that go off this way. And so I think the lead in this effort needs to keep that focus and keep moving forward to creation of the entity and establishing those definitions that you're talking about of public welfare.
Here's a question from a person I know is in agriculture in Socorro County. Urban uses and elected representatives circumvent priority administration. There used to be something called the Water Assembly where we had community conversations, had users and stakeholders at the table. I guess I'd like to comment on that. The state really has no ability today to do priority administration. They don't have the capacity, the people, the boots on the ground. But it is the law, and it's in our Constitution. But our law also says that we need not administer water by priority if we can come to a better agreement. But actually, the Water Security Planning Act and the other regulations for what's called active water resources management, it says regions have a choice. They can say, we want to be administered by priority, or we want to come up with a better plan. That's built into the Water Security Planning Act. So priority administration is always the fallback. It's the law, and unless we can come up with something better by agreement, that's the way we have to go forward. Is priority administration improve the public welfare of the Middle Rio Grande with respect to water availability? I guess that's a question to answer down the road.
That is a question.
Let's see what else we have here. So there's a question here about the water use by Intel. And I remember when Intel had about 8,000 employees here, lots of jobs for the Middle Valley, lots of good jobs. And they were depleting water that, as I recall, was about equivalent to 100 acres of alfalfa. No, I'm sorry, 1,000 acres of alfalfa. Raising 1,000 acres of alfalfa maybe provides 2 or 3 incomes. Intel's same amount of water use provided thousands of jobs. What is the public welfare of the region in balancing those values?
Well, I think that that's going to be a really tricky question. We haven't really talked about the economic, sustainability question that always comes forward to the Water Utility Authority in terms of extending services and those kinds of things. I think that perhaps this planning effort should have a component that talks exactly about that and helps us come to terms locally with what we want to do as a region in terms of the best use of our water. I mean, we need jobs, we need economic vitality, we need water to exist. How do we balance those is the trickiest question, I think.
It seems to me that if we don't have jobs for our people, an economy that produces those jobs, that the Middle Valley just won't exist as it does right now. Do you believe that water security, and without water security, we're not going to have economic security?
No, I think there has to be a balance. That's exactly the question. What that balance is
to be determined.
The very important thing that our community as a whole should be are given a chance here with this water security planning. We're given a chance to do that.
So here's a great question for you, Barbara. Do water experts here realize, maybe I should say, do politicians here realize that many East Mountain residents do not have water anymore? More people and even small water systems, wells, are drying up every year. How can we be included in planning for innovative ways to have safe household water? We want to be a part of the public welfare.
And they should be. And I'm sorry that my colleague, Eric Olivas, who represents the East Mountains, and he listens to his constituents, he would chime in here, I am sure, and say, you will be engaged in this process.
And here's a question that is tailor-made for Commissioner Olivas, but he's not here to answer it. You're on the Water Utility Authority Board, so I'll ask you. The question is, verbatim, how can we secure the engagement of the Water Utility Authority in the planning process for the Middle Rio Grande?
I think that you have a board now that is very interested in doing exactly that. I will promise you that I will continue that effort, and I think that the Water Utility Authority will be engaged in this. There's no question in my mind.
Right. I've heard the state engineer address the Water Utility Authority, and he has recommended that the Water Authority take a lead role in the collaboration that is to come.
As we should.
Well, we are near the end of our time. Our participants are still with us, but I think it's maybe time to bring this to a close. Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share?
I think you covered quite a lot. And I do want to say that Bernalillo County is very much engaged in this effort. We will put resources toward this planning effort, and we will be involved. It's extremely important to us, my colleagues and I.
And as chair, with that statement coming from the chair of the Bernalillo County Board of County Commissioners, it's music to my ears. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wanted to close with by thanking our sponsors. Bernalillo County is a co-sponsor of this workshop tonight. Thank you so much for making yourself and Bernalillo County facilities available, and for your leadership. Our other co-sponsors include the League of Women Voters of New Mexico, New Mexico Wild, 350 New Mexico, and New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light. And I want to thank them all for publicizing our workshops and participating in them. I think I have a closing slide to show you. If I can find it. Here we are. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
We hope that you will join us for our future workshop series. And please, when you leave the webinar, a survey will pop up. Please respond to it. Unless you are already a member of the Water Advocates, we really want to hear from the public and not from people who have already joined our organization. So thank you so much for attending. And we hope to see you at our workshop in November, which I believe is the 16th. So less than a month from now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norm.
Commissioner Baca.
Appreciate it.
And good evening.
Good evening.